Welcome to Keeping the World Company on Think Tech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we'll talk about Trump. Is Trump's new beginning sustainable? Can he and MAGA stay the course? Our co-host for the show is Tim Apicella. Our guests for the show are Gene Rosenfeld, independent scholar, and Manfred Henningsen, emeritus professor, political philosophy, UH Manoa. Welcome to you all. With Trump's new beginning, we seem to be in greater trouble than before. Although we can't return to the way it was before, we can't give up on the republic. That seems to be the consensus among the people I know. We must follow what he does and be part of the opposition that is forming around alternative media. But let's take a look at how he's doing, his beginning, his inauguration, and all the proclamations that he has issued since then. Let me start with you, Tim. Can you give us a handle in general on how Trump is doing out of the gate?
I would say watching presidents come into office for the last 40 some odd years, I've never seen a president move with such speed and determination. First day in office, he signed 44 executive orders in the executive office, the Oval Office. He has now executed 200 executive orders in the first couple of days of his presidency. That's fast and furious. Where I come from, the description actually has been called shock and awe. And I'm always reminded of the word blitzkrieg. So, so many executive orders that I think the media has a hard time keeping up on. I think the attorneys who have filed suits against them already, particularly regarding retraction of birthright citizenship in the United States, already 22 states have filed lawsuits. He's created a great conflict on his hands on purpose and certainly with determination. So I think he's off to a fast start. I think he has rallied a lot of his base to support him. They like this sort of thing. They like some of the, what I would call cruel measures of some of these executive orders. And I'll just say that some of those cruel orders or prescriptions on some of these will affect his own base, yet they do not know it as yet. And I'll just mention one real quick, as he has reversed Joe Biden's executive order of 14087. That was the prescription drug cost efforts. He's reversed that. So these good folks that are mega folks that may be on $35 per month insulin, they may not see that in the future. Hard to say whether his retraction of that executive order will affect insulin, and certainly the cost of the $2,000 out-of-pocket cap on Medicare for drug expenses. We'll see if that is going to be tampered with in the future. Right now, I think it's safe, but that's just one example of how these executive orders will impact American lives, whether you're a Democrat or a MAGA or just a good old-fashioned GOP voter. Change is coming, and it's coming quick.
So, Gene, there seems to be a method about the madness, because this, in general, on the surface, it seems to be mad. It seems to be destructive. Some commentators have said that he is at war with the nation, with all the people at war. And some of his remarks are really unhinged. At the other side of it, though, maybe there's a method here. Maybe he has a larger purpose in mind. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, he definitely has a method. He has a larger purpose in mind. And if you flip to his supporters and his side and see it from their perspective, it's all positive. And he has a unified vision for them. Now, he had 47% of the vote, which is not 50%. So he doesn't really have the majority of the nation behind him. And he has a 46% approval rating. However, that means that the country is split down the middle, and it's very polarized. People are tend more to see each other as polar opposites. We know this. So what he's trying to do when he gives an inaugural address about unifying the country is to bring everyone under the MAGA shield and to be their hero and protector. And the people that are there now see him as flipping the system. He's turned the system on his head. He said he would sign 200 executive orders or executive actions. They're different things in the first day. And he pretty much did that. It took 48 hours, not 24, but he did that. Blitzkrieg is a hallmark of fascist systems. That's the way they operate. And blitzkrieg, of course, is a word that Hitler used. It means lightning war. So shock and awe is the purpose of this, to render your opponents without a leg to stand on, and to demoralize many people so that you can ram through what you want to achieve. And when you want to achieve a revolution in government, that's good. You can immobilize your enemies. What he hasn't really taken into consideration is whether or not he can unify the nation, much less the MAGA movement with all of its factions, whether he can unify us. And that is a much bigger question, because MAGA itself is divided right now. You see the difference between his first and second administrations, what's called 1.0 and 2.0. He has flipped to the oligarchs and to the wealthiest individuals as a basis of his support. And he is embracing their desires, and they are bowing down to him. Whereas the mass movement that he started in 1.0, his first administration, led by the ideologue Steve Bannon, who now has his own independent voice on his program War Room, he is totally opposed to the oligarchs. So what Trump is trying to do is bridge this abyss in his own movement by harking to what each side wants. By pardoning January 6 protesters, he is giving something to Steve Bannon's base and his base. By putting the oligarchs on the dais with his family in the inaugural address and creating a new ministry to streamline the civil service, DOGE, and putting that under Musk's authority, he is giving a bone to the oligarchs. And what he's trying to do is reconcile opposites. It's not sure that he's going to be able to do this.
Wow. Now, this all sets up a question for you, Manfred. Is what he is doing sustainable? He's got these two divisive groups, at least in the country, and he's got two divisive groups under his own tent. And he's made proclamations and promises that we know are either illegal or that he can't keep them one way or the other. So the question is this sustainable? And if not, how will it unravel?
There was one extraordinary voice of protest the day after the inauguration that I thought was stunning. The Episcopalian bishop from Washington, D.C., when she gave, her sermon and put Trump on fire. I think it was this speech by the sermon by the bishop had incredible resonance in Europe. And I think she has become, in the way, the voice of the other America, that I don't know whether it's 50%, it's less than that. And I think Jane underestimates the support that Trump has at this point. It's not 47, it's over 50%. I don't know whether the pardoning of the characters, who attacked violently DC police will not become an additional negative issue for Trump. I think there's some, well, not only the police union, but all kinds of other people in the country are upset about that pardoning. I mean, initially I was somewhat upset about Biden pardoning members of his family and other people, but now I think he did the right thing. What I didn't like was how he the Clintons, Obama, were not coming out after that inauguration speech that they were sitting through without applauding, why they didn't come out with a statement after and criticize the president for this really exceptionally negative indictment of the Biden presidency. So I do not think that this time of glory that Trump seems to think of as the beginning of his presidency will last very long.
What are the dynamics that you foresee? What's going to pull away from what? Who is going to be arguing with whom about the direction to take in this administration?
At this point, the opposition has remained non-existent or silent. I mean, and I don't think it is a silence of approval. No, I think the opposition has at this point no voices to articulate, express, with the exception of that bishop. I mean, the bishop, in a way, was the most extraordinary voice of opposition. And I think that voice will resonate in the future. What she said will, I think, play a role in the growing opposition to the measures of Trump. I mean, it will begin now also with opposition in various cities, in New York, Chicago, and LA, regarding, the removal of immigrants. The critique, I mean, the attempt of the birth citizenship, is a constitutional issue, and I think it will lead to more powerful confrontations ending up in the Supreme Court, because the 14th Amendment, cannot be changed by presidential action. I mean, the 14th Amendment is in another respect a very interesting document. When you look at it, a lot of people, maybe including Trump, should not have been able of running for office, because in the 14th Amendment, you have the Republican Congress of 1868 preventing or trying to prevent people who have a criminal record from running for office. But besides that, I do not think he will get away with that.
Go to you, Tim. Okay, so we have separations going on. We have Bannon versus Musk. We have the oligarchs versus the base. How is that going to play out? At first, when this began to surface, we said he'll never get through this. There's going to be a snake pit and then an explosion among the people around him. That hasn't happened yet. And he was able so far to keep them together, at least on a superficial level. But query, what do you think happens now after he has issued all these proclamations, some of which are really offensive to some of the people involved around him?
Again, I go back to what he promised in the campaign, how he got the votes, how he got reinstalled as this, a second-term president, and that was promises about the economy, the bread and butter issues of America. I think he's going to abandon that, because he knows he can't alone in his administration cause prices to fall and stay. That's called deflation, by the way. Deflation is not a good thing for the economy. All we could do is hope that wages come up enough to meet the past inflation that we've experienced in the last few years. But the bottom line is his base will realize that the promises he made during the election campaign are hollow. In fact, if anything, some of these executive orders, they're going to find out very quickly that it's going to hit their pocketbook, whereas Joe Biden just gave them a pocketbook savings. And I go back to the drug cost cut executive orders that Biden put through. This is totally anti-mega. It's anti-America because it's going to impact a lot of folks. So can he sustain it? No. Sooner or later, that criticism is going to hit social media. It's going to hit the airwaves. So what's he going to do? Well, in my opinion, he'll choose the oligarchs. He doesn't need the MAGA for another election in the future. Doesn't need them. They've served his purpose, and now he's willing to. I think he'll cut them loose, and he'll center his energies on money and getting more money and involving these individuals to include them into an oligarchy form of government where everyone gets rich except for 99% of Americans.
Yeah, and the oligarchs have the power of disinformation. That's the interesting part of it. The base does not really, Well, let me go to Eugene. What about that? Are we on the road? Is this all an indicator that we are on the road to fascism? And if so, how is it going to play out? What he's alienated, or he from a logical point of view, he's alienated a lot of people, and they could stop him. Will they stop him, or has he found a way to create, not only an oligarchy, but fascism?
Well, of course it's fascism, and we're not on the road to it. We're in the middle of it right now. And I've been recording this since 2015 and studying it 15 years before that. And if we go back to our historical cases of fascism, what we can expect, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but what we can expect is that if there's a split in MAGA, or an incipient split, the guy on top has got to do something about that. He's got to purge those that he doesn't need and stay with those he does need. And what Hitler did in the Night of the Long Knives is he purged Ernst Röhm and his army of National Socialists. Röhm was a socialist, but Hitler didn't need him anymore. So he got rid of him. He killed him. And he blended all of his troops, his militia, into the German army, which Hitler took control of. And that, I think, is in Trump's inaugural address, he spent quite a bit of time about reforming the military. He wants to take people who've been drummed out of the military and put them back in. He wants to get rid of those on top that don't agree with him and put his own people in. And he wants only two genders. He wants to get rid of DEI. He wants the military to do one thing, which is fight our foreign enemies. In this next breath, he says he's going to end all wars and be a peacemaker. I wouldn't believe that, because in provoking everyone outside of America, even our friends, he's only going to destabilize and cause other nations to become more sovereign and more inward looking, and to elect people more like him, but their national objectives are different from his. He's already got some things he said about Putin, and he is already, again, leaning towards Xi instead, because Xi has more economic clout than Putin. So he is looking to enlarge the United States, enlarge his power, enlarge the financial concentration at the top in the oligarchy that he's setting up, control the military. And then this way, the people will suffer. They will suffer maybe deflation, maybe stagflation because of tariffs and because of his policies, which are not sustainable economically. But he will continue to win, because that is the thing. You're either winning or you're losing, and he cannot lose.
Well, let me ask you this. I think there's a real question as to whether what he's doing is sustainable. People will not be happy on all sides of the aisle with his proclamations, and they will oppose him. They will oppose him on social media, as we've discussed. What should he do, could he do, to ameliorate that? Now, what will he do if he sees, as we see, that his actions so far have not created a sustainable model? What can he do? What will he do to ameliorate that risk?
Well, to reframe a little bit what I just said and simplify it, one can expect this. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but from past historical cases, I'm setting this up as a possibility if the theory that this is fascist is correct. And that is, he will purge those he does not need. He will attempt to destroy and purge them. Then he will consolidate those he does need, whom he chooses. And most of all, he will consolidate the military behind him. This is the key. If Trump gains control over the military in the United States and they declare their fealty to him, that is a step beyond where we are now and is a very frightening step.
Well, I'm very interested in your thoughts about this, Manfred. We've raised the question of how the rest of the world sees this, whether they see it in the context of what happened in Europe or in other ways. And we have not only this kind of, as Tim suggested, the possibility of Trump selecting one side or the other and abandoning one side or the other. We have the possibility that he will use the army against the civilians. We have this whole extraterritorial initiative of his to go against neighbors and Greenland and Canada and Panama and Mexico too, and use the tariffs and alienate all our allies too. So the question is, how do they see that? And is their view of it of any relevance to how Trump proceeds going forward?
Gene's analysis is a little bit too dramatic for me. We have not reached fascism, institutionalized fascism in the United States. And one thing one should not forget is we still have a functioning Congress, and the opposition in Congress is very, very strong in both parts, in the Senate and in the House. And we will have midterms. And I can really imagine that MAGA will lose in both Senate and the House majority, so that we will get a stalemate after the midterm. And when Jean mentioned the Röhmputsch of 35, she forgot that it was not in the advantage that didn't help the military, it happened the SS. So what Hitler really succeeded by getting rid of the leadership of the stormtroopers, the SA, was to empower Himmler's SS. The military was not, the generals were not on his side. And you have, when you go to Munich 38, you have the attempt of a military putsch against Hitler. It was stopped because of the appeasement policies of Chamberlain. There's a wonderful novel about that and movie, Munich 1938. So for that reason, I do not think we are, at the point where, Hitler was in 1935. And, when it comes to the international scene, the raising the tariffs in Canada and Mexico, especially of Mexican imports, will really have a tremendous negative impact in the United States. Prices will go up. Mexico is today the largest trade partner of the United States, bigger than China. And that's why, Chinese try to get some of their operations moved to Mexico. I think, all of this will not help Trump to retain the power that everybody thinks he has now under control. I think he is overreaching, and for that reason, I think, especially internally, you will see much more opposition emerging. But I still want to go back to the bishop. You have not mentioned it, and she has not become uh, highlighted that much in the American media. But in foreign, I mean, in Europe, for example, she has become a heroine with what she dared to say. And what, in a way, I thought, well, Michelle Obama's absence at the inauguration, uh, you could say, was an act of opposition also. And one could imagine her having made these comments that the bishop did. Her husband did not, and Clinton, both Hillary and Clinton himself did not come out with any negative comments afterwards, which surprised me. And Biden has remained silent for the time being. I think he will come out of hiding very soon. I hope so. So I hope that the opposition to Trump's takeover will slowly emerge. I mean, you didn't have major demonstrations, which surprised some people, but maybe the cold weather was one reason. But I think it was more the fact that there was no voice that articulated this opposition.
I totally agree. And Tim, one thing that comes out of this is reminiscent of the apathy, the complacency we saw in the election itself. And that people don't want to come out, they don't want to oppose. And furthermore, when you have a pathological personality like Trump, if he gets away with something, he's likely to go further. So, are we finished with Trump's arrogant, aggressive moves, both domestically and internationally? What do you think he might do, if he is emboldened after getting away with the last couple of days of his administration?
Well, we've talked about for 8 years the personality that Donald Trump possesses. We know that retaliatory strikes are part of his second nature. I would say right now that the bishop, her name is Marian Edgar.
Bad.
She embarrassed him on the world stage.
Right.
And Donald Trump will not take lightly to that. So as far as his power, his unbridled power, I will not be surprised if he contacts the IRS tomorrow and says, I want a full audit investigation of her crossing the pulpit into politics. And let's look at her tax exempt status of that church. And let's think about revoking it. Because that's the personality we're dealing with here. And also, doesn't it show the public that he really is in control, that his power is not to be questioned, and his personality is certain not to be embarrassed? So will we expect more? We have 4 years more of his unbridled power, or his perception of unbridled power, and he will exercise it as much and as fast and as long as he possibly can. And also, I agree with previous statements about throwing off the MAGA. Doesn't care about them anymore. In fact, I would say beware of the wrath of the betrayed of MAGA, the lovers of Trump. There's nothing worse than a spurred lover of Trump that is going to feel badly. And here's the problem with MAGA. It was 33% of all voters of the Republican Party. They own a lot of guns and a lot of ammo.
Right.
Okay, so if he spurs them into a discarded lover, he may bear the consequences of that.
So, Tim, you often speak about the media, and in order to retain his power, increase his power, it seems to me that Trump has got to control the media, especially the mainstream media, the legacy media, the big guys. Do you think he will do that, and in what way?
It's the playbook of dictators. Any coup d'etat, the first thing you do is, well, in the old days, you go into the radio stations and the TV stations and stop them. Every dictator knows that you've got to control the message so you can supplant it with your own propaganda. So he's doing that very slyly. One, he's threatening the what I call legacy media, ABC, CBS, NBC. He's threatening them with FCC license removal. He's working on another pathway to have the Elon Musk of the world to buy up social media so that they can control what's being posted, what's not being posted. And you have all branches of media. Social media being the most effective right now because it's independent. And he can't afford to have independent thought process being posted in the wild west of social media. So by definition, a dictator has to get control over that message and that means of message.
Gene, we've been assuming, that there may be protests that rises up. Some say slowly, some say it's sort of a function of how quickly he moves with his blitzkrieg. But the other thing that sticks in my head is that not too long ago, he told one of his MAGA groups that if they voted for him now, they would not have to vote again. And the implication of that was that he would somehow end voting. And indeed, there is a bill now in Congress, now in Congress about suppressing votes, requiring proof of citizenship, which actually works against people who are disadvantaged. And so I think he's attacking, as he has before, the voting process and thus the midterms. So with all of that, are you certain we will have midterms? And if not, how do you think that will unfold without midterms?
Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to my mantra that I never predict. Secondly, I am posing an analysis of using one historical case and to comment on our current history. Yes, the SS suppressed the SA, typically, but then the regular army in Germany turned around and kissed Hitler's ring, and the SS became his lead armed force for his system. The point is, he got rid of a very substantial part of his movement that helped him arise to power. And that was Ernst Röhm's essay. That was the point I was making. I think that in some sort of a way, he's going to have to contend with the Steve Bannon end of his party. And he's going to do that by tossing them rewards, like pardoning them. A lot of his basic supporters in MAGA that follow Bannon will, of course, renew their obedience to him, because there is a rule of cognitive dissonance that says when something happens like that, they just turn around and kiss his ring even more. But then there will be a substantial group that don't. And those people do have guns, as Tim has said. If Trump tries to go to extremes, if he does, it's not just that he somehow will gain momentum in the midterms. That is what we expect in American politics. But this is the unexpected. What we may have is an increase in violent confrontation. This is what worries me the most, because we do have a strong opposition. And Marianne Edgar Budd, the Episcopal Bishop of DC, is very brave and one voice. But remember this, she speaks for the Episcopal Church. So if he takes on her, he's taking on the Episcopal Church in the United States. She has some defense there. On the other hand, what we're seeing is an exodus of top flight commentators, columnists, and journalists from the mainstream media onto platforms like Substack, where they are forming new journals. Rubin and Eisman from the Post took a team with them, and they formed a new journal online on Substack called The Contrarian. And they're starting very energetically to examine and criticize and speak out, speaking truth to power, like Marianne Budd did. She gave us a model for how to do that. Every single citizen in the United States can speak up for his teachers, librarians, can, as Governor Green did here in Hawaii, keep the flag at half-mast, even when Trump didn't like that. It's still at half-mast in memory of Jimmy Carter, but it also carries the connotation and symbolism of half-mast for America, because half the people in America are not in favor of Trump. Whether they're Democrats or independents or whatever they are, they're not in favor of Trump, and he's acting as if all of us are. And that may be the hardest thing. Trump is now taking on an opposition in America. Many of us are demoralized. What I've done research on says that 65% of us will just go along. But then there's that large minority of people, and these are the ones he's firing from the DOJ and that are leaving government, and he's forcing to leave government. These are intelligent, experienced, activist human beings. They're not going to go quietly. So there is an opposition.
Okay, Manfred, is that opposition going to rise quickly enough to stop Trump, to protect democracy, to protect the midterms, to actually have an effect on him so that he doesn't keep on doing crazier and crazier things? Or is apathy going to rule? I totally agree with Gene. There are people who are coming out of the woodwork now, taking activist positions who did not take activist positions before. Even some lawyers, for example, who would never have considered becoming activists. But is it going to be enough? Is it going to be strong enough? Is it going to be fast enough? You referred earlier to a slow rise in the protest. Can we afford slow? 2 years, it's not even 2 years, it's less than 2 years and the midterms. I suspect there is a risk that Trump will try to undermine the midterms or manipulate them in some way. What are his tools to do that? How does he respond to the protest you talked about?
The apathy will not last. And the bishop was the first voice, the first very courageous voice that we have heard. But I think she will be joined very soon, if she doesn't get attacked, not the way you describe it with the IRS, but really violently attacked. Her life is, I think, in danger at this point. But let me add one, even though I don't like the comparison with the 30s, the German 30s, that Gene had come back to. There's one thing that I think we have not talked about, which was very important in the German case, in the resistance to Hitler, to some extent also. Not all the generals of Hitler's army kissed his ring. And you have, until July 20, the assassination attempt in 1944, you have always military people being in lead positions. Now, when you're talking about the United States today, I think there is one institution that has not become Trumpist, and that is the military. And you have to remember the difference between the German military, the Nazi military, and the American military is that the oath that German officers and soldiers had to swear was on Hitler, on the Führer. Whereas in the United States, the oath is on the Constitution. And when you think of Milley and all of the other generals, who got into the protest movement against Trump, they always emphasize that. And when you talk to military people today, here in Hawaii and other places, they say, we will not do what Trump thinks he can do with us. We are beholden to the oath that we have sworn to the American Constitution. So for that reason, there you have a bulwark of protection that will not easily, be removed by whatever Trump tries to do.
So Tim, you agree with that? Because Trump is aware of what Manfred is saying. Trump is exquisitely aware, and he's working hard to make the Joint Chiefs belong to him. Look at that appointment he made to the Secretary of Defense, who will probably get confirmed. And the fact is that although everybody swears to the Constitution, that oath doesn't seem to have the effect it used to have. And in Trump's, inaugural proceedings, he took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And we know that he doesn't do that. He will never do that. So query whether that oath means anything now. Tim, do you agree with Manfred about the reliability of the individuals who run the Department of Defense?
Absolutely not. And Manfred, I agree with most things you say, but I think your upper echelons of the military do understand their oath to the Constitution, and I think they aggressively try to preserve it, as did Mark Milley, General Mark Milley. I think the lower ranks are completely persuaded by Trumpism. In fact, after January 6th, a lot of military were rooted out because of their strong beliefs of Trumpism over the Constitution, over their oath to their position in the military. There were investigations on trying to root out just how far and deep did this go. I don't think they stopped. They stopped prematurely. I don't think they've really addressed the amount of servitude or the desire to serve Trump close enough. So I think we have a problem in the military. And if I think Donald Trump says, I want to see the Insurrection Act, then by gosh, the military will be called to it. And I think those who are in the ranks will probably say, we'll step up. And the generals will say, no. I don't know. I don't want to get in the business like Gene is predicting something that sounds so horrific that I can't even get my imagination wrapped around it. But I do not agree that the military is loyal to the Constitution any longer. In fact, maybe it only takes an executive order to change that, as did Hitler. Didn't take much for Hitler to say, your oath to German Constitution is now done. Your oath to Adolf Hitler now starts today. And I remember the ceremony where all fingers went towards the sky and thousands of troops swore that oath to Hitler right then and there.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I want to go to Jean and ask her one question, and for her final thoughts on this. But my question, which I would like her to deal with, is who is among the protesters? Who is among the opposition? Who is among those who would oppose what he's doing? It's not everybody, and it's not people who are apathetic, as Manfred says. But who can we expect? If that's a prediction, you can't answer me. But who should we expect to step up here and defend the country in the next 2 years?
I'm going to take a page from Mark Elias, who appeared on Political Girl on YouTube in a very interesting interview, and say it's up to us. We did this to ourselves. Now it's up to us to undo it if it becomes something that is really an upside down world and the Constitution itself is at risk. I mean, he's really threatening the Constitution as well and the 14th Amendment. The signs are not good. It's very interesting that the use of symbolism and myth and conspiracy theory and gesture, a lot that is happening now is happening in coded language. A salute by Musk, is that a Roman salute, a Hitlerian salute, or is that just an awkward gesture that he made? This idea of a golden age, that's 2,000 years old or more, that we are going to have a golden age. That's what the Romans predicted from Augustus Caesar. We are seeing a renewal of kind of a Roman imperial mentality. I would say that if you thought you saw the imperial presidency with Richard Nixon, this is the imperial presidency on steroids, but it hasn't happened yet. It's starting to happen with the Blitzkrieg. As far as opposition is concerned, when I say it's up to us, there is one phrase I'm going to use time and again, and that is speak truth to power wherever you can. Every single citizen can do that, either by action or by words. If something happens, like Trump says, lower the put the flags back up, forget about Jimmy Carter, this is my inauguration, and the governor of Hawaii doesn't do that, That's speaking truth to power. Marianne Budd gets up and gives an ordinary sermon on Christian ethics to the president and vice president of the United States. That's speaking truth to power. That is defending our institutions. Every human being can go to the library and say, I want this book for my child. Well, I'm sorry, we can't show you that book. Or can go to a teacher and say, I want to know what book was banned. I'm going to let my child read this at home. Every single thing that you do is an act of protest, and it devolves upon the more than 50% of the United States who are not in agreement with our becoming an upside down non-democracy that is going to gird itself and has said it wants to be in power for the next 50 years.
Manfred, speak truth to power sounds like a good idea. I know you don't like to actually make a close comparison between what's going on now and what happened in Germany. But let me ask you this, on the basis of your political philosophy, lifetime study, if the people in Germany and other countries around in Europe at that time had spoken truth to power, would Hitler have succeeded?
Well, it's a question that I will not even try to answer. But I agree with Gene's prediction, semi-prediction about what will happen. But I will make it even more radical and say the more Trump moves in the direction of fascism, the sooner we will get this kind of oppositional response in the United States. It will awaken people. The apathy is a temporary condition of mental paralysis. And I think my original prediction, which I lost and I had to pay for, with a pizza to the three of you, will come true. That America will wake up. And for that reason, I am less pessimistic at this point than I was before the election. Well, I was not pessimistic before the election. I was wrong. But now I think the bishop really was the first carrion cry, that came from the bottom of the people.
Tim, let's go to you for final comments. And I hope you will also discuss in the course of your final comments what we should be looking for going forward. We've seen the election. We've seen 2 days of the Trump administration. We've seen some things that cause us to lose sleep, that shake us up as a country and maybe as a world. Everybody is reacting to him, and he wants to be on the headlines. He wants to have our global attention every day. What should we be looking for going forward from him?
I'd say look for signs of organization. Yeah, it comes up to the individual to make a difference, but the butterfly wings of a million butterflies flapping isn't going to change the direction of the wind. We're going to have to do this as a collective group, and that means someone specifically to lead that group, someone who has the charisma, as Donald Trump has charisma. And we're going to have to see an abandonment of the old ways of thinking. The Democrats are going to need, and independents are going to need to look at a new criteria of what it is that appeals to the American public, the voters of the future elections. And we're going to have to discard some things that maybe have been held tightly for many decades. We're going to have to think out of the box, think innovatively, and most importantly, think collectively and act unified. Because that's one thing Democrats aren't very good at, is being and moving in a unified direction. And if you're going to defeat the forces of a unified opposition, which the MAGA are, they're unified, you'll never win. So the bottom line is look for signs of organization.
Oh, very wise. Very wise for all of you. Thank you, Gene Rosenfeld. Thank you, Manfred Henningsen. And thank you, of course, Tim Apicella. This has been Keeping the World Company. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. We appreciate your comments from all of you, and we appreciate our viewers for watching. Aloha.